Welcome to another edition of Geopolitics and Empire. Joining us for the very first time is Alvin Lui of Courage is a Habit. His links are in the description, but the website is courageisahabit.org. Welcome to the podcast, Alvin.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, sir. It's a pleasure.
You know, it's funny. I saw you a few years back. You gave a fantastic interview, which I shared to from, I think, American thought leaders, Jan Jekielek, whose last name is difficult to pronounce. And
it is, yeah.
And before getting into some of the topics we're going to discuss, anything you want to tell us about the work you do, your background?
Absolutely. Thank you first of all, thank you so much for sharing that. And then it's an honor to be on your show. I've had a great time on a couple of times I've been on American Thought Leaders. And I'm a president of Courage is a Habit. And our organization primarily does two things. The first thing is that we create these really beautiful and easy to follow tools for parents, legislators, school board members who really want to understand what's going on in government K through 12, because it certainly is not the schools that we all went to. And parents are finally seeing that, but there's a lot of lies and gaslighting and deflections and false equivalencies and language contamination. We'll talk about all that today, I'm sure. And so our tools seek to cut through all that so that parents understand what their children are being exposed to 7 hours a day, 5 days a week for 13 years. And so we really focus on teaching parents at a very small level, because we know that when you're a parent of school-age children, you have very little time. And so they don't have time to read long white papers and things of that nature. So we try to give just a little bit of information just so that they feel confident that they can go in and fight for their children, protect their children. But we also have a lot of call to actions. We don't just talk about a problem. We say, look, but here's what you can do about it. Here's what you should do about it. These are your children. You are the ultimate protector of your children. You know your children better than anyone else. And, so we try to give those call to actions, because we believe that if you just create outrage with no outlet, and you end up inadvertently creating hopelessness. And that's the last thing that we want. We don't want any Americans to feel hopeless about anything. The second thing that we do at Courage is a Habit that's equally as important is we've heard people who follow the education fight that people always say that the children are being brainwashed. And while that's true, that's technically true, it's the parents that are being brainwashed first. Because if you don't brainwash parents first, you can't get to the kids, because parents obviously naturally know how to protect their kids. This is inherent to humanity, to nature. You don't need to be taught to protect your kids. The only reason why we're having this issue in government K through 12 is because they've brainwashed the parents first. And we focus a lot on how to have parents understand that they're being fooled first, which then allows, really dishonest actors to get to their children. And so those are the two things that we really do at Courage is a Habit.
All right. Very good. And before delving deeper into some of the minutia, I heard you say somewhere, I think it was in an interview, where you said your great-grandfather ran from communist China. And here we are sort of battling communism in America. I prefer to call it, actually, to be more accurate, liberal globalism, which it's a combination of these things. And it's interesting. I've had a number of friends recently tell me, who are up in Canada, that their Chinese Canadian friends, and it's more than one, I think at least two separate Chinese Canadian friends, and these are Chinese who fled communist China many, many decades ago. And they're saying that now Canada is effectively a communist. And then we're seeing these things in the United States, even here in Mexico, where I am located. And so maybe just to get your broad thoughts to set the stage on anything you want to tell us about your forefathers' experience with communism in China, and then big picture, what you see happening in America.
I think anybody from any communist society will give you almost word for word the same answer that I probably will. I know, and forgive me, I forgot her name, but I know recently I watched a great episode that you had with the woman who was from Cuba.
Mylene,
Oh, that's right. Right. Yeah. And she was great. And I agree with every single word. That's exactly what it is. So my great-grandfather owned two small bakeries. So very humble, the business owner, two small bakeries. And when he was dragged out and beaten, it wasn't by Mao's soldiers. It wasn't by his military. It's by college-age kids, the Red Guard. They were kids, just like the kids that we see today, screaming trans rights and human rights and BLM and, you know, all that kind of stuff, holding Palestine flags and things like that. Same thing. And so my great-grandfather ran from communism, Mao's communism, when he was quite an older man. And so my father never let my siblings and I forget how lucky we are to be born here. And he would always tell us this when we were children: if you can't make it in America, you can't make it anywhere. And he would always remind us that no matter what we faced, the fact that we're here in America already gives us an advantage to succeed in life in whatever it is that we want to do. And so my father never let us forget how lucky we are to be born here and where we came from, but he never let that also be an excuse for why we can't succeed. Like obviously when my parents came here, they had to learn English and, those kind of things. And so what we're seeing today is a repeat of Mao's communism, except it's just from American lens, from American flavor. And my friend G. Van Fleet wrote a great really book about Mao's America, and it's an excellent book, and it's exactly what's happening. But just like Mao knew, just like Hitler knew, just like Chavez and all of them knew, it's all about the children. Or as Abraham Lincoln would say, the philosophy of the schoolhouse in one generation will be the philosophy of government in the next. And so today in government K through 12, it is not that politics, which I often hear even from people on my side, they'll say politics is getting in the way of education, and that's actually not true. What's happening is whatever little education and academics is remaining, which is very, very little, whatever little academics is remaining is getting away at politics. The purpose of government in K through 12 is not academics. It's not reading, writing, it's not teaching the basics. It is teaching children to hate America. And it is through social emotional learning, which we'll talk about. It's through things like mental health, which we will also talk about, things that fool parents, things that fool good people. It's just anti-bullying. Don't you want anti-bullying policies? Sure, of course. Who doesn't want that? We want to be inclusive. Who doesn't want that? We want representation, but those are all the gateways to teaching kids to love socialism, to love communism. But it's not you don't have to teach someone to love something. It's easy to teach someone to hate something. So if you hate white people, you hate America, you think America's oppressive, once you get them to hate the country they live in, once you get them to vilify white Americans, white men, straight white men, things like that, then it's very easy to get them not even to love something, but to simply want something. So I'll give you an example. If you install nothing but politics and identity politics in K through 12, obviously the first thing that goes is basic education, something simple like reading, which is why kids can't read when they graduate high school. They can't read at a 5th grade level, right? So when you can't read, you can't learn. This is not a philosophical thing. This isn't Alvin Lui just, making something up. If you can't read, you can't learn. That's the only way you can learn. You have to be able to read, right? You can watch videos and stuff, sure, but you still got to know how to read. If you cannot read, you cannot learn. And if you can't learn, you can't earn. That's a fact of life. If you cannot learn things, you cannot earn things. And if you can't earn things, you are always going to be angry and hopeless, which is why you see young people today the way they are. They will vote for socialism because once you can get a human being to feel hopeless, it's really easy to get them to love free things or the promise of free things. That's an easy. So you don't have to get them to love communism and socialism. You just have to break them and make them hate their own country. And then obviously make sure that they have no skills, no marketable skills, no way to be self-sufficient, no way to earn money, no way to be financially stable, no possibility. Once you get that person hopeless like this, it's very easy to then dangle communism and socialism. And that's exactly what we're seeing in K through 12 today.
There was an article published on New York Times just a few days ago titled "Kids Rarely Read Whole Books Anymore, Even in English Class." To your point.
That's right.
And I just wanted to mention one more thing, since you mentioned Mylene and our talk on Cuba, and I had one or two people, I kind of fell when I started this podcast. I was going hard on American Empire, and I still find things problematic there. But I just want to talk about nuance. And a few people commented on my interview with Mylene, and I just want to bring up this point where it's like, yes, U.S. foreign policy at times is bad, but she lived in Cuba. I lived, my parents come from communist Yugoslavia, and they tell me that, like, back in the 50s and 60s, there was like, in the early years, it was destitute. There was nothing there in the village, and they just like went to America. And it was like, wow. I lived for 3 years in Kazakhstan from 2017 to 2020, which is former Soviet Union. And you can see it's like I literally stepped back in time into the Soviet Union, and you can see the architecture, the economy, the society. People told me stop talking about politics. The economy is very poor, and some of these people who are these armchair socialists from the West, most have never lived in these countries, and like you can see. I mean, whatever U.S. foreign policy is, that doesn't mean that the Cuban regime today is starving its people. It's incompetence, it's greed. And so I just want to make to that point to those people listening, go to these countries. It's like you wouldn't live there, So and you get often treated especially as a foreigner, And so I just wanted to make that point. And then to go further, you guys put out, maybe to start with this, you had a report recently on the ASCA, American School Counselor Association, repeatedly and systematically supporting DEI from anti-racist messaging to pro-transgender policies. And you say it's affecting red and blue states alike. If you want to tell us about what's going on there.
Sure, absolutely. Yes, we put out a groundbreaking national report. It's the first of its kind to expose ASCA at a national level. And we call it's ASCA is correct. We call them ASCA, or they call themselves ASCA. And the American School Counselor Association, it's an organization that almost no one talks about. They hide in plain sight. And they govern mental health initiatives in all 50 states. So it doesn't matter if you live in a blue state or a red state. Your red state will have spent hundreds of millions over the last 10 years, hundreds of millions on mental health. And again, this is what I said earlier about the second part of Courage is a Habit. We have to help parents be unbrainwashed. When parents hear mental health, they will say, this is great. Children should have good mental health. But the mental health that they're pushing on your children is not what you and I consider good mental health. They hide all the transgenderism, all the anti-racism thing, all the critical race theory, all the anti-America ideology in mental health. So when your red states, and everybody can look it up right now, if you're listening, just go to your Department of Education, type in mental health grants, and you will see it's in the hundreds of millions over the last 10 years. Every time a school district takes the mental health money, they hire ASCA counselors. They use ASCA model. In fact, your education department will literally say, we use the ASCA national model. So this organization trains, certifies, professional development, all that, curriculum, books for school counselors. And they bring this into your children's school. And that's the culture. Your entire school's culture is driven by mental health. Everything is mental health, from the surveys that they collect on your children to all the data-driven, all the research evidence-based. It's all through mental health surveys that they manipulate to say we need more X. And whatever that X is will be a radical ideology, be it representation, meaning skin color, trans, BLM, the pornography in schools, whatever. It all is justified through mental health. So when parents fight these items, they fight them separately, which is great because we need to fight it at a micro level. Until we go to the heart of it, you're just playing whack-a-mole, which is what we've seen. So this report, this violation report, is us giving parents in all 50 states a tool to say we are in violation of not only Trump's executive order, President Trump's executive order, but more importantly, our constitutional rights, because the school counselors are using a government institute, K through 12, as a means to manipulate the views, the values, and the values and the thoughts and the belief system of your children, which is towards the communism that we're talking about. And so what we did with this report is that because we know our enemies better than they know themselves. And when we put something like this out, the first thing they're going to do is going to say is a lie, is misinformation, is right-wing conspiracy theory, right? They're just making it up. So what we did with this report is that every time we accused ASCA of something, we simply link back to their site. That's it. We link back to their own, whether it's a PowerPoint, whether it's a training, whether it's their ethics statements, whether it's their student standards, whether it's their mission statements. It doesn't matter. If we just simply link back to their stuff. So then you can say, look, you read it for yourself. There it is. This is what they're about. They're telling you what they're about. The reason why ASCA or school counselors are hiding in plain sight, like I said earlier, is because when we all went to school, we had something called guidance counselors. Everybody remembers, you probably could not tell me the name of your guidance counselor. You can probably tell me the name of your third grade teacher if you had a really good third grade teacher or a second grade teacher, or maybe a favorite math teacher in high school, or something like that. You can probably tell me names of certain teachers, but you could not tell me the name of your guidance counselor. I think very few people can say that. The reason why you couldn't is because you only saw that person once or twice, and they helped you with your college, like AP courses, or applying for college, or if you went to the military, they would help you fill out military recruitment forms. These guidance counselors were what they called themselves at the time was they were reactive, meaning that you only needed one or two for the entire high school, because they could go days without seeing a child, right? They could go days without seeing somebody. And then obviously when the child needs something, they'll have an appointment, and then they'll come to their office. So they were reactive. They only got involved when a child sought them out for academic purposes. In 2014, the school counselors or the guidance counselors were changed to school counselors. And they were changed through Michelle Obama's Reach Higher initiative. And her initiative basically deputized the guidance counselors into school counselors. And then at the time, they called themselves social change agents. That's what they called themselves. They were social change agents. And so the way she got that in was she said, we need more counselors because we want more children to go to college. Makes sense. So we can't just have one or two in high school. We need dozens of them. Then mental health is really important for children. If they don't have good mental health, they can't learn. Well, that seems like it makes sense too. So put more money in mental health. So now what was only two guidance counselors became 20 school counselors in high school. Then they moved down to middle school. Then they moved down to elementary school. And so now, whether you're in a red state or a blue state, we've now put billions collectively in the United States. We put billions in mental health, and these counselors are all trained in the exact way that our report outlines. So every time you see something in schools, whether it be porn in schools or the anti-racism or the anti-white, anti-America, 100% the transgenderism, no matter what issue you're fighting in school, and no matter what it is that you're seeing, yes, you can call the teachers and principals and school board members. We go at them too, but it's all stemming from mental health, and it's all coming from the school counselors, and it's specifically ASCA.
There's so many things there, and I had a flashback. You took me back in time, so I moved back and forth between U.S. and Croatia, but I recall a lot of my school years in North Side Chicago, and I graduated a half a year early from the U.S. high school because my first 2 years were in Croatia, which has higher academic standards generally. And I remember vividly going to at my U.S. high school to the guidance counselor, and it was like you said, one I think guidance counselor. And they had brochures for universities. Yeah. And so this is what, like 20 plus years ago. Right. And it's like how you said, now it's completely changed. And maybe just on the point, looking at some of these examples, race, this obsession with race. It's funny because 20, 30 years ago, we didn't have all this obsession with race, did we? America was sort of like, it's a mixed race country, right. And I just sort of grew up not thinking about race. My people might consider me white, but I'm actually a Slav and I'm not white by the woke people's own definition. I've read some of their stuff and they say Slavs are not white. So technically I'm not white. And
Yeah.
I grew up amongst Jews and
Yep.
Mexicans, and
Yep.
I ended up marrying a Mexican here. I became a Mexican citizen, and it's just kind of like that was back. And then now they're just so obsessed
Yeah.
with the race. Just maybe can you tell us a bit about some of their obsession with race? And I guess that comes out through CRT, DEI.
Mhm. All of it. Yeah. Well, it's like what Mao did. You have what we have that Mao didn't is he really couldn't use race. He used class because obviously China's a monolith. So you can't blame white people. So, critical race theory, just like queer theory, it's just two sides of the same coin. It's basically holding a certain group that is a normal or good or excellent and saying that's bad and that's evil. So if you're straight and you want to get married early and you want to have kids, then that's oppressive. If you're white or you're not white, you're black or you're Asian, and you believe, like my father believed, that if you can't succeed in America, that's on you, and you can't succeed anywhere else because you have more opportunities here than anybody else. If you believe in that, it doesn't matter. Like they'll call you white if you say that. They won't call you white if you have a different opinion. And so critical race theory is simply teaching kids that when something goes wrong, find something or someone to blame. The last thing you want to look at is yourself. That is the ultimate value change in schools. And so even though critical race theory is ultimately not about going after white people, it's about going after America and anything excellent and anything small government, anything passing down generational wealth. Obviously, that's not passing down generational wealth and wanting small government, wanting government out of your lives, taking personal accountability. That's certainly not reserved for white families. However, the entry point is against white people. That's the easy entry point. And unfortunately, a lot of white folks help them along with their white guilt. Now, I say white guilt only because I think most of your audience members will recognize that term. We always talk about white guilt. But here's what critical race theory is doing to white children and even non-white children if you just want to be successful and you think about passing down generational wealth, things of that nature. It's actually not white guilt, okay? It's actually a misnomer to say white guilt. So what critical race theory is doing, it's passing on white shame. And here's the reason why. When you have guilt, it means that you feel bad about something you've done, some specific thing that you've done, and you feel guilty about it because you know you're wrong. And then at that point, you try to make it right if you can. And if you can't, you might still feel guilty, but you're going to try not to do that again, whatever that thing is. So guilt, it's about feeling bad about what you've done. Shame is about feeling bad about who you are. They're not passing down white guilt, they're passing down white shame, which is why people, when they're fighting the education indoctrination, they'll say, why do you keep telling white kids about something that they got nothing to do with? Their parents didn't own slaves, their grandfather didn't own slaves. They certainly have nothing to do with it. Why are you putting that on them? Is because you want to install that white shame early. And when you can make young people feel shame, there is no redemption from that. You can manipulate that person forever because no matter how much of an ally they say they are, no matter how many anti-racist white fragility books they read, it will never be enough. It doesn't matter if you are a blue-collar white guy that's living in a one-bedroom apartment but a millionaire black man can still point at you and say, you're more privileged than me. They can do that, and it will make sense in the critical race theory world. And then the white guy living in a one-bedroom apartment, working a blue-collar job with his hands full of calluses, will still feel shame next to that black millionaire who's living in a 6,000 square foot house. That's what critical race theory is. It's not about critical thinking. It's about critical consciousness thinking. This is why when you have these young people come out of high school, forget college. The fact that parents are still sending their kids to college is insane because we know exactly what those colleges are. They've been Marxist indoctrination center a lot longer than K through 12. That's why when you talk to young people about this stuff, there's no reason, there's no logic, there's no facts, there's no evidence. It's all emotion. It's all screaming. It's all mantras and chants. You can't show them any data because their brains don't work that way. It's because it's been broken. Their brain's been broken not towards critical thinking, but towards critical consciousness thinking. And in K through 12, the way critical race theory is being delivered is through social emotional learning. So critical race theory is the theory. Social emotional learning is the delivery system. So I'm going to give you an example. Hopefully this will help people understand, because the social emotional learning is it's like nailing jello to the wall. So it's really difficult to explain if you don't are in it like we are. So I want you to forget everything. I want you and your audience listen. I want you to forget everything about all these terms that you and I've been talking about for the last, 15, 20 minutes. I want you to imagine that me, Alvin Lui, I walk into a school and I would like to teach a class on Buddhism. Now, never mind for a fact that I probably wouldn't get that approved, but pretend for a moment that I could. Sophomore, fourth period, Buddhism. Okay, great. So I teach this course about Buddhism. Now, I might teach. I would teach about when he lived, what the country was like when he was alive, when he lived, when he died, how he grew up, how he came to be known as this figurehead for this religion, things of that nature. Now, some kids might take that class and they might come away going, okay, some of that makes sense to me. Maybe I'll apply some of it. Some kids might go, not all of it was nonsense. It was kind of boring. Some kids might go, you know what? I'm going to look into it myself a little bit more. It seems pretty interesting, right? But in either case, I'm teaching you about Buddha and his life and what the country was at that time when he lived so long ago. That's it. But imagine if instead of me teaching a class on Buddhism in the fourth period, imagine if I changed that entire school district or that entire school into a Buddhist temple. Now, when your children walk into a Buddhist temple, this is not walk into fourth period education about Buddha. When you walk into a Buddhist temple, you are learning how to live, behave, and view the world as a practicing Buddhist. Who you marry, who you surround yourself with, your friends, your network, who you hire, who you work for, how you decorate your house, how you look at death itself. Your entire life is looked at through as a practicing Buddhist if you go to a Buddhist temple every day. That's the point of the Buddhist temple. You're learning to live and practice like you're a practicing Buddhist. Your whole worldview is through that, even death itself, even where you go in the afterlife. So replace everything I just said about Buddha and Buddhism and replace it instead with the word critical race theory, critical race theorists, queer theory, and queer theorists or transgender cultists. When your children walk into K through 12 and they're under the umbrella of social emotional learning, they're not learning about critical race theory as a theory. They're not learning queer theory as a theory going, there's this pedophile named John Money and he did this horrible experiment on these two boys. That's not what they're learning. It's okay if they learn that because theories are theories. We can all learn theories, right? It doesn't matter. We can read about Hitler. We can read about Mao. Education is actually good. You should read about these things. You should read about queer theory. You should read about critical race theory. That's fine. But that's not what they're doing. They're manipulating your children to live and behave and think of the world like a critical race theorist, a practicing critical race theorist, a practicing queer theorist, or practicing communist. They're not teaching education like me, Alvin Lui, teach a fourth period class on Buddha. That would be fine. Education is education. But when you're trying to emotionally indoctrinate, not just mentally indoctrinate, but emotionally, meaning that you're trying to create discipleships, that is the problem. And so social emotional learning sounds really, really great. It's just about managing emotions and all those kind of things. But social emotional learning from the very beginning was meant to change the values of children. And because social emotional learning is so vague, you can insert things like Marxism and communism. And then that's exactly what they're getting in schools. This is why it doesn't matter if it's a red or blue state. They all have the same Buddhist temple type of culture.
And this is happening globally now. I've taught in top international schools in Kazakhstan and Mexico. And as you said, there's no separation from the topic. I'm a history teacher. So we look at, I've read books, different religions, like, look at Islam, look at Buddhism, look at Christianity. Right. Sure. And there's a separation. We're examining this text. But as you say, I like how you said they're teaching you they're indoctrinating you to become a Buddhist or a Muslim or whatever. And when I was teaching, you see these new age stuff starting to seep in, mindfulness, right? Yoga, and it's like, look, I can't. I would never ask my kids to pray, my students to pray to Jesus in the class.
Right.
Why are we doing yoga? Which is, I mean, people can look this up. I don't think Christians should be doing yoga. You're yoking yourself to, that's religion.
Right. It's a religion.
And so, and I just wanted to, before moving on, what you mentioned before about the white guilt, I was going to bring that up because you did a clip that's last year that's gaining more traction now on X about the white shame, white. And I had a couple years back, these anonymous accounts on X were attacking me. And one of them one of them was anonymous, and they were commies. And one of them was he had his name, Dan Cullen, I think. He's a Canadian, so Canada Vice journalist. There you go. And I traced some of his work. He was getting financing from the Canadian Communist government. And just because I talked to a whole swath of people from left to right and beyond, right? And just because I platform someone does not mean I agree. Usually there's something that we agree on, and so I had on people, raw egg nationalists who Tucker Carlson did a documentary on him, and I guess he's on the right of the spectrum, and these people started calling me or implying that I was a white supremacist, neo-fascist, far right. And to what you said earlier, my grandpa was a Nazi slave for 6 months during World War II. My uncles fought off, the collapse of communism in Yugoslavia, and I married a brown Mexican and moved to Mexico and became a Mexican. It's like, in what world are you people thinking that I'm a white?
Right.
It's like laughable on its face, but these are the stupid games that they play. They shut up after that. But moving on to transgenderism. And I don't care if this alienates anyone. Transgenderism through and through is wrong, in my opinion. And I just heard from friends of friends who had friends in the US, I won't say which state, but one of their children has, thanks as you're outlining, I can't recall if it was a high school or university, they think they are now another gender. And it's crazy, and we have to. Now it's coming in through the Netflix for the movies. You have to curate what your children are exposed to, so they don't get these crazy ideas. Just any thoughts on this trans stuff?
It's probably the most evil thing that we've seen in this country, because it attacks children at a time when they're just developing, and there's no such thing as a trans child. I think if adults can't say that confidently, to say as easily as I can say the sky is blue and the sun will rise tomorrow, then you won't win against this cult, because it's all about language. The transgender cult has two things. They have two powers, and I'm gonna explain the two powers, and I'm gonna give you two ways to make sure that they have no power over you. They will use these two things hand in glove and fist. These two things can't be separated. It must work together. Okay. And it works on good people. And I'll explain why. The first one is language contamination. They use your vocabulary, but not your dictionary. And this is largely true, not just in the transgenderism, in things in general, in the education and the brainwashing of children, the brainwashing of parents, but for sure the transgender cult uses this very heavily. And the best way that I can explain language contamination is they use your vocabulary, but not your dictionary. Okay. They use your vocabulary, but not your dictionary. So for example, if parents go, hey, look, this social emotional learning, this is bad. I've read things that this is not good. Why are you guys doing this? And they'll say, oh, is this about teaching empathy? That's it. And then of course, most parents will be like, oh, well, I teach empathy at home. But for your audience listening, if I told you, hey, I'm teaching my 7-year-old, 8-year-old, 9-year-old, 10-year-old empathy, what do you think I'm teaching him? What do you think I'm teaching her? Most parents would say something like, well, we're going to teach them to walk in a mile in someone else's shoes, be in someone else's shoes. How would you feel if a child took your toys? How would you feel if someone said something mean to you? Probably something like that. We would probably explain empathy to a child through that lens of trying to put yourself in someone else's shoes, right? And if they're a little bit older, it might be a little more nuanced. And so when a school says that, the parent defines it in their mind, meaning that, oh, this is what I teach my child too. But language contamination, they use your vocabulary, but not your dictionary. What the schools do and what the transgender cult does, the school counselors, because they're the biggest foot soldiers of the transgender cult, they will teach your daughter to have empathy for the mentally ill man that eventually will walk into their sports or their locker rooms or their spas or their gym locker rooms. So when a woman, a girl, 15, 16, 25, 30, doesn't matter, and they start hollering about a mentally ill man in their private spaces, because they've been brainwashed in schools, now their natural inclination is muted. Now they must have empathy for this man. How would you like it if someone kicked you out of the locker room? How would you like it if someone made you feel not included in a spa? How would you feel? Empathy. You see, they use your vocabulary, not your dictionary. So they use that for everything: compassion, inclusion, healthcare, safety, everything. Every good trait, or what we define as good traits, they will use language contamination to get you to stand down. So that's the first thing that they use. The second thing that they use that has to be tied to that language contamination is they weaponize your kindness. They weaponize your kindness, or they weaponize your empathy. If you reserve your empathy, then they can't weaponize it. Language contamination largely doesn't work. So for example, if they try to say you should have empathy, well, what about that man? He just wants to go to the bathroom. If you have no empathy for him, you go, I don't care. Doesn't work, right? It doesn't work. So those two powers, it works because the majority of people, whether it's in America, whether it's overseas or anybody, the majority of human beings are actually very good people, generally speaking, especially the West. And so when you weaponize people's kindness, they automatically want the person not to feel bad, because that's what good people do. So topple that with language contamination is how the transgender cult has gotten so much leeway. So the thing that we teach parents, especially parents, is we teach yourself, first of all, and then teach your children. Teaching your children to be kind is not a priority. I know that's a very popular thing for schools to say, and social media, mental health, be kind costs us nothing. It doesn't mean anything. None of that means anything. Children are already kind. You just teach them, if they're mean in a certain point, you just correct that meanness and you move on. There's none of this like the religion of kindness. What you should be teaching children is how to draw boundaries, because children have none. Because they're children, right? Because they trust everybody. They talk to everybody, they trust everybody. They don't have any boundaries because they don't have any life experience. So as a parent, the priority isn't teaching your children to be kind. They're already kind. They love everybody. The priority is to teach them how to draw boundaries. This is why we talk about rejecting inclusion and embracing exclusion. The transgender cult has no power if you rob them of your empathy and you embrace exclusion. So here is a rule of thumb that I want everyone to remember about empathy. Treat empathy like a really precious resource, because it is. More precious than money, more precious than gold, more precious than anything. And this empathy, this beautiful resource, should only be reserved for people that you love and the people that love you back. You can have compassion for someone who suffered something, like, someone that you don't love and they don't love you back, but you can have compassion, right? Like if I know somebody in my neighborhood or in my community whose child's sick, of course I have compassion for them. As a parent, my heart breaks for them. And I will individually try to help them if I can. But empathy is a different thing. When you have empathy for somebody, like which is what the transgender cult talks about all the time, they're getting you to lower yourself, lower your boundaries, and put yourself out, to basically put yourself out in harm's way, or put yourself out in some way in light of this person's needs. That's what the transgender cult does to children and women. So if every time I talk about empathy, you go, okay, empathy is for the people I love and the people that love me back. If it's not that, then I don't care. And if you take that indifference, then the transgender cult has no power. And so today, the reason why you've got children sterilized and mutilated, and they'll tell you it's not happening, of course it's a lie, of course it's happening, is because you've got all these parents who have been fooled into believing that there's such thing as a trans child. You've got the American Academy of Pediatrics completely taken over. You've got all these all these psychology associations and the mental health associations. They're all completely corrupted by the transgender cult. So parents truly have nowhere to turn because everywhere you turn, they're telling you your child could be trans and they could kill themselves. And it's just all emotional blackmail. That's all it is. So and it all starts in schools. It all starts with school counselors because they're the ones that had set the tone to say schools should be keeping secrets from parents because parents are unsafe. Okay, so that's where it starts. So if anybody's wondering where all this like keeping secrets from parents and what's going on in that, it started in the K through 12 when school counselors started saying, well, we can't tell parents that little Johnny says that he's Janie because the parents don't support him, and then now they're dangerous. That's how that started. That's where that keeping secrets from parents started, and that's where the transgender cult took a foothold. Now, of course, social media, no doubt, social media and Reddit and all that stuff certainly has had a huge hand in pushing the transgenderism, but the social contagion did not start on TikTok. The social contagion started in K through 12.
You made me think of Rolling Stones and sympathy for the devil. So kind of like they're trying to get us to have sympathy for something that is wrong, right? Mm-hmm. I would say, which is a sin. And you see it in many movies. There's a lot of this Gnostic occult stuff, Marvel films, where in their own words, like Good Fight Ministries has done a great documentary on how Iron Man is effectively Satan. Like they show you that in the comic book, they say Tony Stark, that his father made a deal with the devil and he's a bastard child of the devil. Or Doctor Strange. Oh,
really?
Yeah. I'm like, you can't believe this stuff. Or that
I didn't know that.
Doctor Strange, the history of the Iron Man Strange was modeled on Aleister Crowley, and it's like, you can't make this stuff up. It's in their own comic lore, or they have all of these dark figures like Batman who are Satan-like figures, and they're trying to get you to have empathy for the villain, always
the villain
in Hollywood. And I just wanted
storytelling apparatus. Yeah. It's a great way to deliver.
And as you say, our kids should be taught to draw boundaries, to be firm. And again, this thing about trans, when they call me transphobic, I say, are you heterophobic? Are you Christophobic? Because they talk about tolerance, but when you think about it, it's a double standard, because you can't. Those can't really coexist, because Christianity on the one hand preaches this is wrong, and they say, but we can all kind of coexist. But I think internally it's deceptive, because they know that you can't coexist, so they're trying to cut the other one out so they come out on top. Meanwhile, preaching tolerance, and it's a sham. And I want to turn towards some solutions. Maybe one of them. Homeschooling. Reason magazine recently came out with an article talking about how homeschooling is hitting record numbers in the U.S. I see it also on the rise, at least in my circles here in Mexico. We homeschool.
Sure.
So I think that's one solution. Any thoughts on homeschooling?
Well, certainly, if you can pull your kids from government K through 12, do so. And I always say that if you're waiting to save money for your kids' college, and most people kind of take that for granted, they say, of course we're saving money. We're trying to do this. We're trying to take out a loan. And I would say that if you're going to go into debt and you're going to take out a loan, or you're going to do something, do it when your kids are young, not when they're 18. Do it because this is their growth. This is the most important part of a human being's life, is from birth to 18, not 18 on. But we spend tens of thousands of dollars going to college. Why do we do that? That itself has been a huge social contagion. That itself has been a huge psych op, to say we need to spend tens of thousands of dollars to send them to these institutions with almost no ROI. We would never invest in a business without a business plan and a look at ROI and all those different things. But we can do that with college, because that's what we all do. We just take it for granted. And meanwhile, we drop our kids off at these government institutions when they are forming. That makes no sense, because we all know that the most fragile part of any sentient being, whether it's a fish or a human being or a dog or a cat, is when they're young. That's when they're the most fragile. That's when they can get hurt the most. So why would you not want your kids home with you when they're young? So now, that being said, because America has been structured as primarily a two working household, it is very difficult. It is a lot of sacrifice. It is not easy to homeschool. It is not easy. The homeschooling part of it is easy because we also think that I'm going to sit at home for 7 hours with my child. No, you sit at home with 2, right? It's 2 hours, 3 hours. Education is not sit at a desk for 7 hours, okay, and memorize things. But the actual homeschooling, the logistic of homeschooling aside, understand pulling your kids is tough. But we always encourage, if you can, try your best to try to get yourself to the point where you can pull your kids. Because however bad you think K through 12 is, it is a lot worse than what you think it is, even if you live in a red county, even if you live in a red state. So if you can pull your kids, pull your kids. But beyond that, 2 things. Number 1, if you pull your kids, you cannot use that as an excuse to not fight the K through 12 system or what's in the K through 12 system. Because number 1, your property tax, about 50 to 60% of your property tax still goes to K through 12. A lot of people don't know that. A lot of people don't know that 50 to 60% of your property tax goes to your education system that's doing this to children. So you are quite literally an investor into this system. So you have to stay involved. Second, when you homeschool your child is going to be like a superhero when they get out into the workforce. Mentally, emotionally, the way they think, the way they talk, the way they interact with people, their education, they're going to be far superior to any public school child. But the problem is, if you do not stay involved with the education fight, your child is going to be targeted because they need to drag people like your kids down. Because they cannot have kids who are independent and want small government and be self-sufficient and all those things. So your child will be an outlier, not in a good way. In a good way for you, for him, but not in a good way in the world if you do not get this out, because who are they going to marry? Who are they going to work with? Who's going to hire them? Who are they going to hire? They start a business. You cannot just hide your kids in homeschool and expect everything to be good because the rest of the other kids are being brainwashed to want communism. So your children cannot live in that world. You don't want to hand that world onto your children, so you still have to stay involved. Okay, that's one thing if you homeschool. Secondly, they are coming after homeschoolers with the exact same thing that I talked about with the school counselors. Parents are unsafe and abusive. So I'll give you an example. And so it's going to be through mental health, by the way. They're going to come after, they are coming after homeschoolers through mental health. But I'll give you a specific example. So in New Jersey, they proposed 2 bills, okay? The first bill is 8A, as in Apple, 5825. And that bill is basically, they're going to try anyway, to force homeschoolers to abide by certain public school curriculum. So they're already infringing on the curriculum. They're saying you have to teach like DEI, you have to teach transgenderism and stuff. So they're going to try to infringe on your curriculum. Now, that particular bill in New Jersey, the 5825, you can get around that. Not to say that a state should mandate, you should fight it tooth and nail. But if they say, hey, you got to teach DEI in your home, you can say, oh, fine, I teach DEI. I teach that DEI is wrong, is racist, is Marxist. I taught it. There you go. You got to teach transgenderism. I did. I taught them about John Money and how he mutilate kids. That's how it started. Great. I taught them that, right? So you can do that because you're teaching them through your lens at home. However, here's the second bill in New Jersey that is the dangerous. And that's A 5796 or Senate Bill 4889. Okay. That bill is mental health checks that once a year, homeschool families need to take their child to meet with school counselor, and they got to do a mental health check to make sure the child's doing well. Now, number 1, when a conservative family brings a child in, the school counselors will always say the child's not doing well. Their mental health is not good because they're bigots, because they believe in the Second Amendment. They don't believe there's such a thing as a trans child, things like that. But that once a year is going to turn to once a quarter. It's going to turn to once a month. So they're already literally doing exactly what we exposed with ASCA, the mental health, to say parents that have kids at home are teaching them patriotic conservative values, and that's bad for their mental health. And that's how they're going to get in. So if you're going to pull your kids, number one, do it. I'm 1,000% behind you. Do it, do it, do it. If you can at all possible, do it. Okay. Whatever you have to do financially to make it work, do it. Secondly, you got to keep fighting in the schools. You cannot turn this country over to raising a generation, two generation of Marxists and kids who hate America. And number three, you got to stay involved simply because they're coming after homeschool anyway. So the fact that you stay involved in the public school fight, when they start passing these bills, you're going to recognize it. If you just put your head in the sand and say, I'm homeschooling my kid, I'm out of here, I'm done, I don't have to worry about it anymore. When they come after your homeschoolers, you're not going to know how they're doing it. Now, all that being said, you and I both know that the majority of families still cannot homeschool their kids. That's the reality, right? That the majority of families, even though it's blown up, even though it's increased by 400% over the last 4 or 5 years because of things like what Courage is a Habit's doing, exposing, we also know that while that explosion is a lot, percentage-wise, the majority of people still can. So here's what, if you cannot pull your kids or you can't pull your kids yet, here is something I want every parent to do. Go to courageisahabit.org, courageisahabit.org, and click on school counselors. Okay, there's a little tab called school counselors. And you can download the report that we were just talking about, and you can use that to expose what's happening in your school, get other parents involved, try to get ASCA out of your, if you have a good school board, you can try to get the ASCA policies and the models out of your school. Okay, you can do that. But more importantly, each of the items in the school counselors is called Behind Closed Doors, is our campaign exposing the ASCA in many different ways. At the end of each of those tools, it doesn't matter which one you pick, there's an opt-out form. It's written by our attorneys. I beg every parent, please fill out that opt-out form, one per child per year. So if you have 3 kids in school, fill out 3 with their names, and then but you got to do it every year. Send it to your superintendent, your principal, your teachers, and your school counselors. And you tell them, my child, it will never have an informal or formal meeting with any mental health professionals without my approval or my presence. Parents, please do that. There is zero reason why your children are meeting with any mental health professionals in schools. If you truly believe your child needs someone to help them through something, if you have something specific, not general life things that all happens to children. That's what they do. Every time a child, something's wrong, they don't get a grade, or their friends don't like them, or they break up, all of a sudden it's mental health. No. If you truly believe that something in your family specifically has happened and your child needs some help, then you find them a family therapist and you do your research like you would anybody else. You ask family and friends, you get reviews, you interview the professional, and then you choose one that you truly believe aligns with you and your family values. That's how you choose a mental health professional. You would not, don't rely on a government K through 12 on these school counselors. And most of these school counselors that we've seen, to be quite frank, they have the worst mental health of anybody we've ever seen. They are really low IQ. They believe every single radical ideology that comes their way. It doesn't matter. If it's BLM, they're all about BLM. If it's the trans rights or human rights, they're all about that. They are low IQ. They have horrible mental health. And increasingly, because all the billions being spent, they're really young. They're like 25 years old, 24 years old. What do they know about life and mental health? You want them coaching or managing your children's mental health? So there's zero value in having your children talk to anybody as a mental health professional in K through 12. So please fill that out. It's right there on our website, courageisahabit.org, and click on school counselors. And we create these tools for you so that you have the confidence and the tools to be able to protect your children.
And I'll just add one more example of what people can do. So where I used to teach in Mexico, I left 2017, and I have friends who still teach there. And from time to time, I asked them, like, what's the environment like? And so, when I was there, it was still relatively normal. Mexico's a socially conservative, relatively, society that's changing with all the wokeism being pumped in through social media, internet, YouTube, Netflix.
Right.
But I had a few years back, one of my former colleagues and friends said that he's started to have students at the high school here in Mexico who are trans. They'll come up to him and say, I forget the case. It was a boy who wants to be called by a girl's name or vice versa. And then, we're supposed to take at the school every semester a certain amount of capacitation, they call it, like, professional training for teachers, like 10, 20, 30, 40 hours, almost like Marxist re-education. And he told me there was a course that touched on like toxic masculinity or something. And I told him, if I was still working there, like, I do not care. You had the COVID thing with the shots. Only one of my former colleagues was fired because she refused to take the injection. So I would have done the same thing.
Sure.
And if I had a student that came up to me and said, because this is, again, imposing your religion or
That's
worldview on me, you can't. I'm not asking you to pray. I'm never going to ask you to, subject yourself, force you to, to worship Jesus or something. And you can't ask me to call a boy a girl. I'm not going to do it. Fire me. I think this is the attitude people should have, or the toxic masculinity class. If the administrators say, you got to take this course, it has nothing to do with history. I'm not taking a course on toxic masculinity. And so I think this is the attitude people have to, going back to your earlier reference, like drawing firm boundaries. And so beyond what some of the solutions you propose, anything else you'd suggest in terms of what is to be done, activism or final thoughts?
It all starts with the language. If you want to make a difference, it has to start with your own mind first. And so the reason why they are always a thought police, always thought police you, because the truism in life is how you think about something is how you talk. So your thoughts become your words, and your words become your habits. The more you talk about something, that's the habit that you have about things, and your habits become your character. And so once they can control that, they control all of you. So it always starts with thoughts, but how do they get in your thoughts? It's language. They make you feel guilty. So my best advice for anyone starting out, you may not obviously have a show like yours and have a platform like yours, and people make excuses and they're like, well, I'm not like him. Yeah, I don't have a show. I don't talk. What do I do? I don't have this. I don't have that. Well, you have it. It starts with you. So the easiest thing that I want everyone listening, whether you have 1 follower or 100 followers, is to reject inclusive language. Every time media, social media, Hollywood, any of these legacy, left-wing legacy media, when they tell you can't say something, that is your sign to say that. Whatever they say you can't say more of it. Whatever they say you can't bring that up more. You don't have to stand in the middle of your office with a microphone. You don't have to do that. But what you cannot do is to acquiesce and say, I won't say that. Because once they can control your thoughts, they can control your words, and they control your words, they control your habits and your character. And that's why people go, I don't understand. I don't know how to stand up for my children. That's just a weird thing to say. What do you mean you don't know how to stand up for your children? That's like, that's animals know how to stand up for their kids, So it's because you've allowed them to make fear a habit. So when they ask you to put that black square up at work, or put a little, he hymns and shit like that in your email, you're like, well, I don't want to rock the boat. I'll do it. It's not a big deal. But those little things were a big deal because it taught you, it manipulated your thoughts. You start using language like a trans woman. There's no such thing as a trans woman. That's a mentally ill man that pretends to be a woman, right? You can call him an ugly man or whatever, but don't say trans woman. Things like that. So those things matter if you want to truly make an impact in this culture. And if you're sick of all the things that you're seeing, it starts with you. It starts with your mind. And that's the best advice I can give, because that's training your mind to make courage a habit instead of fear a habit. Because every time you acquiesce, every time, like you said, I'll just take that, toxic masculinity training. I don't believe in it, but I'm just going to keep quiet and take it. If you do that, then they're going to silence you because you're silencing yourself. They're teaching you to not, you can't stand up. Your fear is a habit. They're creating a habit. Like I said, if you can sit in that toxic masculinity workplace training or that professional development or whatever in your place of work, if you do that, then you're not speaking up because you just sat in that training and you've subjected yourself to that brainwashing. So once that happens, you've developed a habit of fear, a habit of staying silent. And then the next time they're going to escalate it. And then you're going to go, well, that's not right. That's even more wrong. But you're going to go with it because you've already made fear a habit. So my best advice is reject inclusive language, guard your empathy. And when you do that and you say what they say you can't say or shouldn't say, and you say it anyway, then you've trained your brain to make courage a habit. And the beautiful thing about making courage a habit is once you make that a habit, you won't go back the other way. It's not an easy road. It certainly is not. But once you take that path, you will never go back. Meaning that if you make courage a habit and you start speaking truth and you start going, I don't care what anybody calls me, call me a racist bigot. It means nothing to me. You might as well say I have like 3 eyes. It doesn't mean anything to me. If you get to that point, then you'll never go back to self-silencing yourself. So that's what I've seen to be the hardest thing. It's not consuming great shows like yours. It's not even reading Courage is a Habit tools. It's how you think about what they say, that what they tell you you can and cannot say. And if you can overcome that, then you're on your way to helping make a change in this country.
That was extremely powerful and I think very important. When I think courage is a habit, I'm finally getting it. I had a past guest, Alex Thompson, who said, practice saying no to petty tyranny. And
I love that.
And what you said when we're with friends and families. Last night, I was with friends and extended family here in Mexico, and I could see the way that they talk and then their beliefs. They're very woke, liberal, globalist.
Yeah.
And so now I'm going to say something that's going to be uncomfortable. And even at the grocery store, it's another topic, but privacy and this digital technocracy that's upon us here in Mexico. They ask you for your phone number every time you go to Walmart, and I respond like unabashedly, unashamedly. I'm like, what is this, Soviet Union? Like, my parents come from communism. I can't buy bread without knowing it's and that makes them think. And I'm like literally the only guy in line. And I say it loud in Spanish so everyone can hear me. And that's to your point. And now I'm getting, when you say embrace exclusion, before talking to you, I was kind of unclear, but now it's like, yes, I actually want to get one of those hats or T-shirts. Embrace exclusion. I don't, I'm leaving my home. Actually, I'm moving because they decided to install a biometric exit and entry to the entrance of the gated community.
I heard that.
And I'm like, and I told everyone off. I didn't curse or anything. I just told them, all my neighbors. Now I'm seen as I've embraced exclusion. I'm like the pariah. Yeah. They're all like liberal, globalist, techno-fascists, and they're like, yeah, we're going to force you to use an app and scan your face and buy.
Oh my God!
Like you guys are crazy. Like this is insane. I'm totally embracing the exclusion. I'm like, you guys are crazy, not me. And
there you go. That's right. There you go.
Anyways, your links are in the description. But where are the best places for people to follow Courage as a Habit or support you?
So our socials are at Courage Habit. So whether you're on X or Instagram or Facebook, if you just type in at Courage Habit, you'll find our socials. CourageIsAHabit.org, as I said, it's our website with all our tools for parents. Obviously, we focused very heavily today on school counselors and things, which is important. And if there's only one thing I would like everyone to focus on, is the school counselors and the mental health. But certainly we got a ton of other tools about other things that are happening in schools. And if you want to get one of these hats, then if you go to CourageIsAHabit.org, just click on store, and it'll take you right to the store.
All right.
And of course, that would help us. That we're a nonprofit, so any donations, whether you buy a hat or whether you donate $10 or $20, it certainly helps our little team and our mission and continue to produce tools and travel and pay for things like subscriptions and things like that.
All right. Very cool. Keep up the great work, and thanks for coming on the podcast.
Oh, this was great. Thank you so much for having me. I truly appreciate it. Thank you so much.